much, Sue. Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to each and every one of you attending today's discussion on shaping the future of education, hosted by Asian Philanthropy Circle and UNICEF. I really want to express my gratitude to the Philanthropy Asia Alliance for extending this invitation to UNICEF to participate and to partner with Asian Philanthropy Circle for collaborating and organizing this event. Our gathering today is showing a shared commitment, especially making a significant impact on the education, the future generation of children in the region. I must emphasize that there is urgency and also the importance of our conversation today. I firmly believe that Asia and Pacific is a region with unparalleled potential, abundant energy, we can see the energy in the room, a remarkable innovation spirit, all of which are essential for achieving the highest standards of children in the region in leading way to the global progress. However, there are still untapped potential that we must really unlock. The region is very dynamic, at the same time very diverse. We have a rich culture of people, environment, economy, political systems. Notably, it's a home to a quarter of the world's population, so we are talking about 600 million children. This is a great potential. I just want to quickly touch on my personal journey. As you may figure out from my name, I'm from Myanmar. It's the least developing country in the region, currently challenged by conflict, violence. So what brings me here today to get a job at a reputable, notable organization like UNICEF and talking to such a highly influential business, philanthropists, private sector people? The only thing that I can think of that brings me here today is education. Though I came from a lower middle class family, my parents, my grandparents, they really value education. So at the age of 5, I was school ready, because there are many kids in this region who are not school ready yet. When I finished my primary, grade 5, I learned to read, because there are still many children in the region who haven't learned to read or write at the level of grade 5. And then once you learn to read, the world is yours, the sky is your limit. You started reading to learn more. So education is the key to bring me here. But there are still many unfortunate children around the region, and we need to really cooperate together. There's a saying that it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a nation to educate a child properly. So this is a very good gathering. We have a business sector, private sector, philanthropists who have a lot of innovative ideas, a lot of resources that we could support the government, the education sector, the families, the community, and children to make sure that they have a brighter future. Thank you very much. I wish you all a very impactful meeting.
Good afternoon, everybody. So with that note, let's get to work. Usually a conference like this, things start really punctual. And by the way, I'm from Japan. I'm also very time conscious. So I was looking at my watch, like 2 o'clock. And we started eventually maybe 7 minutes late. And that's why, it's because we were so excited. I'm just so humbly honored to be part of this session, to really talk about education. Even better, let's be part of shaping the future. We are not here just to talk about what is needed. We're going to here to talk about what we can do. And I believe everybody who was present at the plenary yesterday heard loud and clear. It really takes all the partnership, private, public, philanthropy, everybody. So what has brought us all together? I see different backgrounds, I see different commitments, I see different interests. What has brought us together for this very, very important session? It's because we are so committed, we are so passionate about education. And even better, we are really looking for solutions so that we can be part of the solutions. So with that, let's get to work. So I'm actually going to, not here standing just to do lecturing, because I'm also a former teacher, and I know we learn, human beings learn when we are engaged. So I'm going to give you Menti survey. And I probably, please take out your mobile phone. And so if you feel, like you can maybe take this test. So for every US dollar spent on pre-primary education, what would be the longer-term returns that benefit society? And by pre-primary education, meaning that pre-primary school, like a kindergarten, preschool, so basically those education that the children can engage before they start grade 1 in primary. So please take the screenshot, the QR code, and then for every US dollar spent on pre-primary education, what are the longer-term returns that benefit society? And I believe there are some multiple answers that you can choose one from. And let's see how we are doing. I think there are 9 respondents so far. I see some people. Click. Yeah. Okay. I hear some laughing. Good. Okay. Hold on a second. So maybe we can change to another screen to show the results. Okay. So it's actually $9. So if you think about the pre-primary education, people think that, it's about the younger kids learning by playing. But that's where the importance of the learning journey actually starts, right? So the pre-primary education is absolutely important. All right, so let's move on. So I've already talked about the rate of return in terms of a pre-primary. And you might wonder, it's better to spend more money into the higher education. You can spend a lot of money in higher education, but the rate of return is the highest at the pre-primary. So it's really important for you to note. In terms of also to talk about the girls' education, unfortunately, despite the progress, there are still a number of, especially adolescent girls in the region, who are being discriminated against and then excluded from the education system. And just to let you know, in terms of the, the research showed that every extra year of schooling for girl increases her future earning by up to 20%. So if you wanted to be smarter in terms of where to invest more, you might have some solutions. You might have some answers here already. Okay, so that is why UNICEF globally, we are operating and supporting the pre-primary early learning, early childhood education in 129 countries in the world. And we also see, in terms of globally, the gross pre-primary enrollment has nearly doubled. And also the same trend is found in the region. The enrollment has doubled. And it's really encouraging the progress that we are very, very fortunate to be part of. So in order to make the learning for every child, we take the life cycle approach. And first, we wanted to make sure all the children, by the time they start primary education, that they are ready to learn. And that's about 5 years old, 6 years old. And for that to happen, a child needs to be well-nourished, healthy, well cared for, and then having a good stimulation, lots of learning opportunities. And then by the age of 10, foundational learning. By the end of primary school, we wanted to make sure that every child has a foundational learning so that they can move on to the next chapter in their lives. And then by the age of 18, all the adolescent girls and boys to be engaged in learning and also the civic education, and then transition from the childhood to adulthood. So let's take a moment in terms of what we have in each of the three the stages of the children's life. So by the 5, we want the younger children to be ready to start schooling. And so for that, just like building a house where you have the very fragile soil, you can spend tons of money and build a really nice mansion and spend a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of money. But then if earthquake happens, or if the climate change induced cyclone, floods happen, the house will be washed away. So you needed to have a really strong foundation. And that's what early childhood development, investing in the younger children, actually does, laying out the stronger foundation. And just only last year, 4 million younger children have been supported, and UNICEF been very proud to be part of that partnerships. I wanted to speak a little bit about very important initiatives. Prudential and Prudence Foundation, they've been partnering with UNICEF and looking at the early childhood development in Thailand and also in Indonesia. And so since 2019, the partnership has benefited thousands of children and teachers with improved ECD knowledge, and also the parents with better caregiving support. And the contents for the Early Moments Matter on Mobile in Thailand has already reaching over 140 teachers and caregivers. What is unique about this partnership is the co-creation. Through the Prudential and Prudential Thailand networks, hospitals, the messages based upon the nurturing care framework have been already distributed. So there's a certain number of people that we can reach if we are working alone. But because of those co-creation, because of the partnership, we are reaching many more. Another example that I wanted to speak is about the Tanoto Foundation's partnership in the case of Indonesia, unlocking a future with potential with nutrition towards zero stunting. And this is in partnership together with the government of Indonesia. We're really supporting the social behavior change communication. And so far, over 350,000 pregnant women and caregivers of children under 2 years old receiving the essential behavior change communication messages. And over 8,000 health workers and community volunteers have been also trained in the social behavior change communication interventions. And to date, the national awareness campaign on stunting prevention has already reaching over 12 million people with the key messages. Now let's move on to the primary school level. And this is where the critical moment happens. Because the children are no longer learning to read, but actually reading to learn other subjects and contents. And I think everybody is really passionate about the digital solution and technology. And we are also very proud to be part of supporting the governments and together with the partners in terms of providing the digital platform for the children, especially the most disadvantaged children, to have the access to the digital learning so that they can continue their education. And one of the initiatives together with Microsoft is called the Learning Passport. And it's an online, mobile, but also offline technology platform that enables the children to have the continuous learning opportunity. To date, we are operating with the Learning Passport in 33 countries and over 4.6 million users. And in the region, we are already reaching also the many number of children. And last year, we also have a new partner who has joined the Learning Passport. It's Sony. And now moving on to the age of 18. So basically, it's the adolescent age. We do have a partnership with Pandora. And the Pandora partnership has been renewed in 2023, but so far already reaching 1.2 million adolescents, especially focusing on girls. In the case of Vietnam, really focusing on the science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics in those provinces where we see struggles, the struggling girls, especially moving on from primary to secondary, and also completing the secondary education. So let me just briefly talk about this kind of a circle. key to success? And I think the answer is very simple. It's the partnerships. Obviously, when we talk about education, the first partner that we can think of, or at least one of the first partners that we always think of, is the Ministry of Education. They are the one who puts the curriculum, they are the one who puts the standards, they are the ones who puts the other teachers in place. But also, we do work with the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Planning. Why? Because we want the education to be prioritized in the national development agenda. We also want to make sure that there is a certain amount of the government budget allocation goes to the Ministry of Education for education services. And also we work with the Ministry of Social Welfare because they are the one who support in terms of the child protection issues, well-being, mental health. And like at the community level, the teachers can work with the community social workers so that the children of the mental illness issues and also the children with disabilities can be really supported. We also work with the local government. Quite a few countries in our region, they have the decentralized education systems. So there's certain decisions to be made at the local level, and this is why we, UNICEF, together with the partners, engage with the local government so that they can make the best informed decision, really supporting the most disadvantaged children. We engage also with the National Assembly. They are the ones who eventually passed education law. So we want to make sure that they are better informed in terms of what should be the priority when they are passing, when they're reviewing the laws and decrees. We engage also with the research institutes, universities, and we also have the research institute within the organization. Why? Because we really, really needed to look at the data. What is data telling us? Scientific evidence, analysis, so that we can really make the informed decision, so that we can effectively utilize the resources. And we also work with, of course, with the private sector. For various reasons, obviously, the financial contribution is always important, but we do feel that the private sectors, they can play a really, really important role. Be a social, like a good model, making sure that they provide, good parental leaves, breastfeeding rooms at their workplace, so they can be really a nice, kind of visionaries for the others. And then we also work with the donors and partners. And also the regional bodies like ASEAN, Southeast Asia Ministers of Education, and of course, the parenting communities. Yesterday, I believe somebody talked about, it's now PPP, but maybe one more P, public-private philanthropy partnership. I also like to throw in parents, because they are the caregivers, the first teachers for their children, and we also wanted to really engage them. And they can be the really good resource people who can be the better caregivers, and then who can also contribute more in terms of the children. And I put the children, of course, at the center of this circle, because they are the one, not just to receive the services, but they can really play a role in terms of deciding what the future that they want, what the future they would like to see, even for their own children. So increasingly, we do work with children, adolescents, because so that they can really influence, they can really voice their opinions. And sometimes we connect different stakeholders that you can see on the screen. We don't just work with bilaterally or unilaterally. We are the ones, together with the partners, we bring different partners together. The partners who are rarely talk to each other. So this is really, I think it's really nice kind of a diagram in terms of how we work in terms of the partnerships, because the partnerships is the solution for us to really tackle this huge crisis right now at the moment. Very quickly, again, I mean, it's great to see all these progresses, but unfortunately, we still have a very, very, very big problem. So, another mentee time. Question. What are the percentage of the fifth grade children cannot read a simple story in Asian Pacific? So can you take out your mobile phone and then try to answer this question? Lots of progresses, but it looks like there's a still big problem ahead of us. So what would be the percentage that you think that the fifth grade children cannot read a simple story in Asian Pacific? Are we getting answers already? Okay. Looks like we've got a majority voting for the 45%, and that's exactly the right answer. It's a 45%. But think of it. It's quite daunting. It's close to 50% of the children. And then when the time that they actually they're leaving the primary school, they cannot even read a simple story. So that's really concerning situation. Very quickly, there's a huge variation even in our region. As you can see, the upper right parts, Laos, PDR, Philippines, Cambodia, Myanmar, the percentage is as high as 90%. This is really, really concerning. Let me just move on to another concerning figure, which is the 16 million young children are not accessing early learning education. I already talked about how important it is to have the early learning opportunity. But look at this figure, 60 million children in our region are not accessing early learning. Apologies, another horrifying figure that I'm going to give, which is about out-of-school children and adolescents in our region. 35 million. And unfortunately, this was even before the pandemic. So we estimate the additional couple of millions have become also out-of-school children. But together, I think the good news is that we are here today, and then we're going to talk about in terms of, so then what we can do together so that we can create and shape the future, and we can find solutions, and we can implement those solutions. And together, basically, we become stronger and make bigger impact. And again, early learning, foundational learning, inclusive education. Let's not leave any child behind. Children with disabilities, children of ethno-linguistic minorities, children affected by the conflict, emergencies. Nobody should be left behind. And also for the children who have been out of school, we provide flexible multiple learning pathways so that they can back on track, they can continue their learning journey. Digital learning, digital is a solution. It can really be an enabler. It can help us to accelerate our learning recovery journey. And climate smart education. We needed to make sure that the children are also aware in terms of what the impacts of the climate change, but we build the education system so that the education system become more resilient. Even typhoon, cyclone comes, emergency happens, but the schools needed to be still standing and keep providing the good learning opportunity all the children, no matter what. So with that, I would have a pleasure and an honor. We now have a very special guest in this room. Her name is Van Thị Thu Ha. Ha is from Vietnam, and she flew from Vietnam to join us today for this session. And I'm going to ask Ha to introduce herself. And so Ha, please do come to the stage. So please welcome Ha with a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Lời đầu tiên thì cho phép em xin gửi tới quý vị đại biểu, các bác lãnh đạo cũng như là quý vị khách quý lời kính chúc sức khỏe và lời chào trân trọng nhất ạ.
Ladies and gentlemen, warmest greetings to everyone in the audience. I'm so proud and filled with emotion to be here at the summit.
Em xin tự giới thiệu, em tên là Vàng Thị Thu Hà, năm nay 20 tuổi, sinh ra và lớn lên tại huyện Bắc Hà, tỉnh Lào Cai, một tỉnh vùng núi phía Bắc của Việt Nam. Và hiện tại thì em đang theo học tại Học viện Báo chí Tuyên truyền tại tại Hà Nội, thủ đô của Việt Nam ạ.
My name is Vàng Thị Thu Hà. I'm 20 years old. I'm come from Bắc Hà, Lào Cai, the northern mountainous province in the north of Vietnam. And I'm currently at the second years at the university studying journalism and communication.
Em sẽ không có được một cái cơ hội được học tập tại một trường đại học ở Hà Nội như ngày hôm nay nếu như mà 10 năm trước em không là một trong 2 lứa học sinh được tham gia học chương trình giáo dục song ngữ dựa trên cơ sở tiếng mẹ đẻ với sự hỗ trợ của Quỹ Nhi đồng Liên Hợp Quốc UNICEF Việt Nam tại Bắc Hà thông qua sự hợp tác với Sở Giáo dục và Đào tạo tỉnh Lào Cai.
I would not have the chance, the opportunities to study at university in the capital like today if it weren't for the chance of 10 years ago when I was one of the 2 student cohorts selected to participate in the bilingual education programs based on mother tongue, supported by the UNICEF of Vietnam in collaboration with the Department of Education of Lào Cai.
Và đây là huyện Bắc Hà, nơi em sinh ra và lớn lên, với 25 dân tộc anh em sinh sống, và em là dân tộc Mông. Dân tộc này chiếm 22% tại huyện Bắc Hà.
This is the photo of Bắc Hà where I was born and grew up, where we have 25 ethnic groups in the province, and my ethnic group is Hmong, and we're constituting of 22% of the population here.
Và ngôn ngữ giao tiếp hàng ngày của chúng em hoàn toàn là bằng tiếng Mông. Và khi đi học thì các anh chị khóa trước sẽ phải đến trường và học tập hoàn toàn bằng tiếng Việt, tiếng phổ thông quốc gia. Và điều đó thì khiến anh chị khá là lo lắng và thiếu tự tin, dẫn đến cái kết quả học tập nó không được cao.
For us, the Hmong people, we communicate mainly in Hmong language in the family, in the villages. So for many students, when they come to the mainstream school studying the national Vietnamese language, they struggle quite a bit, and lack of confidence, and sometimes resulted in low academic performance.
Và tuy nhiên thì rất là may mắn khi mà đến khóa học của chúng em với sự giúp đỡ của UNICEF Việt Nam thì chúng em đã được học chương trình giáo dục song ngữ, và điều đó thì đã khiến cho bọn em được tiếp thu kiến thức một cách tốt hơn.
Fortunately, I was among the 2 cohorts selected to study the mother tongues based bilingual education program that have helped me to be more confident and gain numerous skills.
Đó là khi mà bước vào tiểu học 2 năm đầu tiên thì chúng em được học hoàn toàn bằng tiếng mẹ đẻ, đó là tiếng Mông, ở 4 kỹ năng nghe, nói, đọc, viết, trong khi mà tiếng Việt thì chỉ ở 2 kỹ năng nghe và nói. Ở 3 năm cuối cùng của cấp tiểu học thì chúng em được học tập hoàn toàn song song 4 kỹ năng bằng cả tiếng mẹ đẻ và tiếng Việt. Điều đó đã giúp cho bọn em được tự tin hơn và có được một cái kết quả học tập cao hơn so với các anh chị khóa trước.
So the program was structured in the way that in the first 2 years of primary school, the main language of instruction was in mother tongue, and we study in mother tongue for the 4 skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. We also study Vietnamese national language, but only in speaking and listening. And then in the last 3 years of primary school, we study both languages for the 4 skills.
Ngoài việc học tập bằng kiến thức bằng 2 thứ tiếng, tiếng Việt và tiếng mẹ đẻ, thì chúng em còn được tham gia các hoạt động để nhằm bảo tồn bản sắc văn hóa dân tộc và cải thiện kỹ năng mềm. Chúng em được tổ chức và tham gia vào các câu lạc bộ phát thanh măng non, mời các nghệ nhân tham gia hướng dẫn về các điệu múa khen, múa ô, cũng như là phổ biến về cái phong tục tập quán của dân tộc mình.
Additionally, we also had a chance to participate in many activities to enhance our cultural and preserve our cultural identities. For example, we have the clubs at the school. We also invited artists to come in and taught us about the tradition, the music, culinary arts, etc.
Và sau khi kết thúc cấp tiểu học thì các bạn cùng em học chương trình giáo dục song ngữ đã đạt được kết quả kép. Chúng em đạt được cái tiêu chuẩn mà Bộ Giáo dục Đào tạo quy định về kiến thức, và vừa giỏi tiếng Việt, giỏi cả tiếng mẹ đẻ.
So as a result, me and our bilingual peers, we completed the program with dual results, like completed the learning outcome standards set by the ministry, but also excels in both language, the mother tongue and Vietnamese.
Sau khi kết thúc chương trình học tại trường tiểu học thì em đã đăng ký thi lên trường phổ thông dân tộc nội trú Bắc Hà, và với những gì mà mình tích lũy được từ chương trình giáo dục song ngữ thì em đã thi đỗ vào trường với cái kết quả cao và đạt được top 1 đầu vào. Đây là một ngôi trường mà rất nhiều bạn mong muốn được thi vào, bởi vì là học ở đây các bạn sẽ được hỗ trợ tiền ăn ngủ tại trường, và em với gia đình rất tự hào vì điều đó.
After completing primary school, I applied for study in the boarding school in the province. With strong foundational skills set from the foundational bilingual education program, I was able to pass the entrance exam with top score. This is a school of many dreams of the children in the town, because the student here got 100% support for food and accommodation, which is a great support to parents from poor families. And me and my family really proud of this achievement.
Bản thân em luôn cảm thấy là học chương trình giáo dục song ngữ đã mang đến cho em một cái nền tảng tốt về kiến thức, cũng như là thông qua đó thì em hình thành được những cái kỹ năng mềm, em hình thành được cái sự tự tin, kỹ năng giao tiếp cũng như là làm việc nhóm. Thông qua đó thì em có thể em có thể có kỹ năng tình cảm xã hội cũng như là tôn trọng sự khác biệt. Qua đó thì em đã trưởng thành và tự lập hơn.
I believe I got very strong foundational skills from this program, and the program did not give me just good skills academically, but also transferable skills, because in the program we learn to problem solve, we learn to ask questions, we learn about social emotional skills, and to respect the differences. So this program has been like really a great help to me.
Và hiện tại thì khi mà đang học tại thủ đô thì chúng em cũng có gặp gỡ và giao lưu với rất nhiều bạn cùng học chương trình giáo dục song ngữ, và bọn chúng em đã cùng liên kết và tham gia hoạt động tại câu lạc bộ sinh viên Mông tình nguyện tại Hà Nội.
And you can see on the screen, those are the photos of many of us who passed the bilingual education program. Now we study at university in Hanoi. And we form among volunteer clubs to share our cultures and organize events and activities for students, and share with other students from other ethnic groups.
Câu lạc bộ sinh viên Mông tình nguyện tại Hà Nội thì có rất nhiều hoạt động thú vị, ví dụ như là các chiến dịch tình nguyện, và nổi bật nhất chính là sự kiện Tết Mông xuống phố. Chúng em muốn mang đến cái văn hóa của người Mông, mang đến thủ đô để giao lưu với bạn bè, và cái sự kiện này đã thu hút được rất nhiều khán giả cũng như là đông đảo bạn bè quốc tế tham gia.
We organize different volunteering activities. Also, recently we also organized the Hmong New Year Festival to share about our tradition, how we celebrate New Year's to everyone in the city. And it attracted a lot of volunteers, guests and international friends.
Học tập xong thì em vẫn luôn mong muốn trở thành một phát thanh viên tiếng dân tộc, sử dụng cái kỹ năng và kiến thức của mình để quay trở lại quê hương, bảo tồn bản sắc văn hóa dân tộc và nâng cao chất lượng giáo dục tại địa phương.
After completing the university, I plan to go back to my hometown and become a Hmong ethnic broadcaster to work in the local TV channel. I want to help preserve and promote the cultures of different ethnic groups, and also to help the children in my hometown to improve the quality of education.
Một lần nữa thì em rất trân trọng và biết ơn các thầy cô cũng như là các nhà tài trợ đã triển khai chương trình giáo dục song ngữ dựa trên cơ sở tiếng mẹ đẻ tại huyện Bắc Hà, Lào Cai, và rất vui khi mà Sở Giáo dục và Đào tạo Lào Cai với sự hỗ trợ của UNICEF vẫn đang nhân rộng chương trình này để mà các bạn học sinh dân tộc Mông như em ở Lào Cai được hưởng lợi và học tập tốt hơn.
Once again, I would like to sincerely thank the donors, UNICEF, and my dedicated teachers who implemented the multilingual education program in the province. And I'm delighted to know that the local Department of Education, UNICEF, and the ministry are expanding this program to other provinces, to other schools, so many more children can benefit from this program like me.
Em hy vọng là các nhà tài trợ và UNICEF sẽ vẫn luôn đầu tư và ủng hộ các chương trình giáo dục giống như là chương trình giáo dục song ngữ ở Bắc Hà, Lào Cai, để mà chúng em được học tập tốt hơn và mang đến một tương lai công bằng hơn với mọi trẻ em ạ.
I wish that you continue to support us to bridge the education equality for marginalized children. To really, your help can save life, and please join us in create a fairer future for our children.
Một lần nữa thì xin trân trọng cảm ơn các nhà tài trợ, các bác lãnh đạo cũng như là quý vị khách quý đã lắng nghe và cho phép em được chia sẻ câu chuyện của mình tại đây.
Thank you very much for listening and for giving me a chance to share my story. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that's a really powerful story. And I have a little bit of a personal also excitement here, I have to confess. I was in Vietnam when she was in the mother tongue-based bilingual education program. She was 5 years old, and of course she said, sorry, Mitsue, I don't remember you, but I do remember her when she was little. And this was when the Vietnam government, they really wanted to improve the education, learning, and looking at ethnic minority children and certain groups of the children who were really, really lagging behind in their learning. So we said, UNICEF, together with other partners, research institution, but also the provincial government, we said, okay, well, let's think about, let's think outside the box. Let's do something creative. So we looked at international research studies and learning that the children learn best in their own language. So we said, okay, well, let's try that out. After 10 years, Lao Cai provincial government, they still continue this mother tongue-based bilingual education. You know why? Because there are the results, because the children are flourishing, because they do see the benefits. And again, that was a really nice example in terms of partners coming together. It was Ministry of Education and Training in Hanoi, Lao Cai Department of Education and Training in Lao Cai Province, and Lao Cai, the provincial government, National Assembly, media, and Research Institute. We all had a role to play. So again, all the results that I've spoken, all the progresses that I've highlighted wouldn't be possible if we are working alone. And it's because we are coming together, it's been made possible. So thank you very much. And I just wanted to maybe close my the part. I think this was back in 19th century. Henry Ford, very famous person, of course. When everybody was seeing and after a faster horse and maybe lucrative vehicles, but people couldn't really afford. But he had a vision. He invented this quadricycle, basically using the 4 bicycle wheels. And then we invented the first time gasoline-induced like a vehicle. And then he also had a vision to make that kind of a vehicle available and affordable for the ordinary people. And he created the Ford company. And also another quote that I wanted to share. Richard Buckminster Fuller said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." So again, I'm here to really invite you to really think outside the box and share your knowledge. And I think Sue said that this is about the learning. And I also wanted to learn. Let's learn together. Let's share ideas, creative thinking, innovative thinking, so that we can really tackle this problem and really improve the learning for all the children in Asia and Pacific. Thank you very much for your attention. So I believe we're going to do the Yes, so now we are here to take any questions or any comments, anything. Anything is really welcome. Please share your thoughts. What are you thinking? Your ideas, anything. And there's no more mentee survey, so please feel free to share your thoughts, even just what you're reflecting upon now. Anything would be great. Yes.
Who has achieved so much. And you are living proof that investing in education and languages is really a passport to success. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Amazing story. I would like to ask if she's aware in her cohort or the two cohort, if there are any that did not really arrive at where she is, and how everyone here could help improve.
Thank you very much for the question.
Dạ vâng ạ, với câu hỏi của bác thì em xin được trả lời như sau. Bởi vì là trong cái khóa học của chúng em thì các bạn được hoàn toàn cập nhật kiến thức bằng tiếng mẹ đẻ. Chính vì điều đấy nên là các bạn có thể dễ hiểu hơn, bắt cái kiến thức đấy nó một cách rất là nhanh chóng. Và chính vì là bởi vì được học bằng cái tiếng mẹ đẻ của mình nên là các bạn ấy hoàn toàn hiểu và nó rất dễ để tiếp thu cái kiến thức đấy. Chính vì cái điều đó nên là mặc dù có một số bạn học không được nhanh cho lắm, nhưng mà về cái kết quả chung ấy thì các bạn lúc nào cũng đạt được cái kết quả và được lên lớp một cách nó hoàn toàn là một cái kết quả nó khá là cao. Các bạn sẽ hoàn toàn cập nhật kiến thức một cách rất là đầy đủ ấy ạ. Thế nên là cũng không có quá nhiều bạn là có một cái kết quả thấp. Các bạn có thể hoàn toàn cập nhật kiến thức như chúng em. Các bạn không học đại học thì sẽ sang cái hướng là các bạn sẽ đi học nghề hết đấy ạ. Sẽ cùng với đi ra các trung tâm đào tạo để học nghề và sau đó là về làm nghề. Nhưng mà các bạn đều học hết cấp trung học phổ thông và có bằng học cấp trung học phổ thông ở khóa chúng em.
So thank you for your questions. In our cohort, all of us completed the upper secondary program. Of course, not all of us came to university. Like in my cohort, like about 70 children, then 10 went to university in the big city in Hanoi, and a few go to the university in town. Some students chose to pursue vocational training. But with the program, we all advanced to the next level and completed the secondary education.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jason Lee from the Milken Institute. I just want to say it's very inspiring that we can hear directly your voice here in Singapore. Thank you for flying from Vietnam. What is your message, as in, if you to share your hope for the next generation, what would you want to say to them so that we can bring it forward to them, to the other children out there? And then another question, more from a technology perspective, as we see the disruption of technology has been there from COVID-19, and how technology has accelerated a lot of the pace of change. Do you see changes happening in the ecosystem of things in the next 2 to 5 years? Thank you.
Em vẫn luôn rất tự hào vì được là tham gia vào trong chương trình giáo dục song ngữ, và em cũng hy vọng là các bạn phía sau em được học chương trình giáo dục song ngữ thì vẫn sẽ luôn tự hào vì cái điều đó và sẽ tiếp thu cái kiến thức một cách nó tốt hơn chúng em và phát triển cái từ đó để tiếp thu kiến thức và phát triển cái văn hóa của bọn em nhiều hơn, để mà có thể là thông qua đó từ các bạn đấy có thể đưa ra những cái ý tưởng tốt hơn để có thể cùng nhau phát triển học tập chúc các bạn ấy ạ.
Yeah, I wish more children would benefit from the bilingual education program, because I saw the benefit, and we also was able to develop our skills and preserve our culture, which is very important. So that's my hope for the children.
Second question, in terms of the technology, we do see that as an enabler. Obviously, children should have acquire the digital literacy skills. But it can also help them to really leapfrog in terms of the learning, and especially during the pandemic when the schools were closed, and there was one of the few options for the children to stay engaged in learning. So in a sense, I think we do see that as an enabler. We also do pay attention in terms of the online safety, making sure that the children are protected and really, meaningfully engaged in the digital. And I just wanted to also emphasize the importance of the teachers and also the parents. teachers and parents, they needed to be aware in terms of how the children are using the technology so that they can be not only just a gatekeeper, but also they can really help the children to optimize the use of the technology. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm Carla Haddad Mardini, and I was very, very inspired by the different interventions earlier. Let me just start by saying that education is deeply personal for me too. I grew up in wartime Lebanon in the 80s and 90s, and I also wouldn't have been here, similar to Mio, had I not had the education I had and had my parents and my teachers not made the sacrifices they made. So I want to just share with you very quickly that when we would be under heavy bombardment, it was a civil war and a regional war, we would be in the bunker, not knowing if we would make it till the next day, and still we studied, not to miss out on school and have learning gaps. School closures happened regularly. And I wanted to quote my mother as we start in this session, who used to always say, Carla, your education is your passport. No one can strip it away from you. You take it with you to the grave. They can take everything else, but your education is yours. And I think this is the spirit of this session today. And we've heard from wonderful people earlier that investing in education, and I'm quoting Mitsui, is very important. And again, every dollar invested in pre-primary school education yields up to $9 in societal benefits. So the evidence is there. The science is there. We had the living proof earlier showing us what happened to her in Vietnam and where she is today and the ambitions she has for the future. So with that, I want to speak about the collaboration that is required to make a dent in terms of learning outcomes and education in the world, despite all the challenges we're facing from wars, armed conflicts, violence, natural disasters, climate change, extreme weather shocks, you name it. There is work that needs to be done at the intersection of public-private sectors and philanthropy and the famous or infamous PPPPs. We can add Ps as much as we want. The question is, how can we engage in an intentional way at that intersection to really make a dent? And so with that, I am very pleased to be here with a deep bench of panelists. And we have with us Benny Lee from the Tanoto Foundation. We have Fifi Setiawati Pangestu from Bhakti Barito Foundation. We have Nicole Niao from the Prudence Foundation. And we have Raman Sidhu at the very end from the Octava Foundation. These inspiring individuals, and I've read their bios and their profiles and what they've achieved so far, are absolutely critical to making a dent in the space of education and education outcomes. So I want us to be inspired by them. I hope this panel will be interactive and generate thoughts and insights. And I would like to start by asking a question to all of them, and we'll go one by one, on why do you think investing in education is so important from where you sit and from your own experience? And let's start with Benny. Over to you.
Thank you, Carla. And thanks for having me and the panel. I think the data is clear. Just now, Mitsui has shared that every $1 invested in education, pre-primary education, yields $9 in return. I think if you drill deeper into the data, you will even find that it matters more into lower income families, more than higher income families. So the $9 is like an average, but if you go deeper down into the data, you find that it matters more to those who are deeply in need. In Tanoto Foundation, we believe in the transformative power of education to bring about changes to people's lives, to fulfill their potential, and to improve lives. And we do it across the whole spectrum of education, from early childhood education to basic education, to even futures leaders education. So what we do is that we look at the white spaces, places where it's underserved, and where our investment will actually generate greatest impact. And here, that's why we look at all these places where actually investment makes a lot of difference. Early childhood education, for example, if you look at the region, there's a lot of disparity. Asia is growing, is dynamic. Over the past few decades, it has improved a lot in terms of economy and society. But therein also lies all the attendant issues, disparities. Just give you an example, between urban and rural disparity. In China, for example, the preschool enrollment ratio in urban settings is as high as 80%. I think just now the keynote speaker has also highlighted some of these ratios. But if you go to the rural villages, you find that actually it is only half of what is in the urban setting. It hovers around 30–40%. And some of it is due to infrastructure, but most of it is due to cultural. How grandparents or parents do not see the need for preschool and early childhood education. And that's where Thanato Foundation moves in to help bring early childhood services to some of these families, role model the kind of good parenting practices so that the grandparents, the parents can bring it back home where the child's first classroom really is. So there's an example. I think there are many, many of such stories that we can share, which really matters to what education is really about. Thank you.
Thank you, Benny. And with that, let's go to Raman. What does it mean for you to invest in education?
Sorry, I thought you were going to use the linear process, but you caught me in surprise. Very good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be here amongst friends, and I see a lot of familiar faces, and I know I was prompted yesterday to actually speak my mind, and I'm looking at a friend here who prompted me to do so. Octava Foundation, why do we invest in education? I think we've heard about the lever education is for personal success and the success of economies and economic prosperities. But I think what's also important is for us at the foundation to identify where in this education spectrum do we play in. And we fairly squarely work in the space of attainment gap. So children are at school, and in the region we have a classic fail of education system. We have children at school and not learning. And if we had this kind of a system anywhere else in any other sector, that shop would have been shut down by now. 45% of the widgets that we're putting into the system are not gaining anything out of it, are not getting transformative. And that's a classic fail. So we work in this realm of attainment gap. And attainment gap differs country to country. The nuance of what is leading to attainment gap from one education system to another education system differs. So I'll give you an example here. In Singapore, we have 100% access to primary school system. We're sitting in a region where we looked at the numbers. You know, the range could be anywhere between the 30 million children that are out of school constitutes from across the region, right? But we still have attainment gap here in Singapore. So all of those who've seen PISA results, and I'm not saying PISA is the litmus test, I definitely have an opinion about it. But if you took PISA as a litmus test of the education systems, and then you'll realize that Singapore is kind of at the top and has been for a while, but we have a nuance problem here. Our lowest performing child and the highest performing child has the largest gap in the world in terms of attainment. Now that says something about the attainment gap, right? So we work specifically on the attainment gap. So the context in Singapore for us is working with children from those who are struggling with the attainment gap. What are the reasons that lead to these attainment gaps? Is it school related? Is it parent related? Is it community related? Is it mindset related? Is it foundational literacy numeracy? Is it parents' motivation for the learner? Is it all of it? So we try to look at it from a context. And then if you look at it from the region, one example I can give you is in Thailand. That number of 25% of learners not learning in primary school is actually a true number. And we think it's higher, but that's the current number that came out of the state. So there we are again looking at why aren't children learning and where are they not learning, and how do you then address the very nuance of foundational reading that is a precursor to foundational literacy and play as a precursor to both of these skill sets. So it's a nuance, but we fairly squarely work in attainment gap.
Thank you, Raman. Interesting. We'll come back to that. Let's go to Fifi. Same question.
Well, I think in Indonesia there is a high demographic of children and youth. Therefore, education is definitely somewhere we can invest in. And education has so many aspects. We have decided to focus our resources in climate education because I feel like the world is now highly vulnerable to the effects of climate change, and there is an urgency and a gap that we should address. And therefore, 2 years ago, we have developed this program, our flagship, called Green Guardians Program. It's a holistic school assistance program where we aim to help primary schools attain the Green School accreditation that is set by the Ministry of Environment and Education. And our work includes raising climate literacy in children and also building teachers' capacity in addressing these climate learning needs, as well as some infrastructure support. Yeah.
Thank you, Fifi. And over to Nicole on why investing in education is so important.
Thank you, Clara. I think, looking from the slides that Mitsui has presented, I think the stats are very clear. Although there has been a lot of progresses, but there's still a lot of gaps. 35 million children are still out of school. So I think investing in education is like, there's still a lot of work to do. And from the Prudence Foundation perspective, we are a corporate foundation of Prudential in Asia, and we have operations in Asia and Africa. And our kind of like from a foundation perspective, we really wanted to build community resilience against life risk. And to build resilience, we look at education. A lot of our programs, 80% of our programs are focusing on children. How do we, give them the best start in life? And so therefore, in the space of children, education is a key, is a must. And when we look at education, we kind of look at it in 3 different aspects. One, as you have seen from the slides, I think, there is science to show that 80% of a child's brain is formed in the first 1,000 days. And that's why we work with UNICEF, really focusing on how can we, help children develop to their full potential. And with that, there is a huge focus to that, with echoing what Penny was saying, there's a huge focus on parenting because the first education is actually from their parents, from the home environment. So we work very closely with UNICEF in Thailand and in Indonesia to really integrate the nurturing care that has a huge focus on parenting, to integrate it into the healthcare system, to caregivers, to parents. And the second part is that I think beyond literacy, numeracy, foundational skills, there is also an increasing focus on life skill. I think in the 21st century these days, I think we're looking a lot about, we're talking a lot about the soft skills. And very much in line with the business that we do, we are a financial services organization. But we realize that there is financial education is hugely missing in education system. Yet money is something that touch upon everybody. So we wanted to help, bring financial education to as many children as possible. So that is another area that we focus on. And thirdly, I think, from the video that you saw, I think when there was a frame of disaster striking education, and not too distant memories ago, we have seen the entire schools across the world were closed because of pandemic. So another area of focus of work that we do for the past 10 years since our inception is Safe School. How do we build education resilience against disaster? We used to focus a lot on natural disaster, which is increasingly more frequent and intense these days. But after the pandemic, we realized that education sector, the risk that children are facing is multifaceted. It includes not only natural disaster, but pandemic, health, as well as conflict, as well as everyday risk like road safety. So we kind of wanted to make sure that education system communities as well as teachers and children and students can build resilience against these risks.
Thank you. And your point on life skills, the soft skills and the life skills are being considered as hard skills more and more. It's not just the nice thing to have. We need to teach children to have them. Let's come back to the Tanoto Foundation. Benny, you've worked across the sectors with philanthropists, with government, with the World Bank, with UNICEF. Could you say a little bit more on the ethos of the foundation and also what were the challenges in partnering? Because we know that partnering is not easy.
Yes, Tanoto Foundation believes in working together with all the like-minded organizations in what we have, over the past 2 days called the PPPP model, Philanthropic Private-Public Partnership, for a very simple reason. Firstly, I think it is a very practical approach. If you look at in terms of perspectives, Tanoto Foundation's annual giving is about $40 million. Just a small fraction compared to just even, let's say, the Indonesian budget for education, which stands at $41 billion. And of course, it's minuscule compared to the global annual giving, which I believe some estimate to be $1 trillion. So in order for us to be able to scale and to actually amplify our impact, it makes sense for us to work across all like-minded organizations to bring the impact across to many, many areas that we ourselves can't personally touch. But more fundamentally, I think it is important for us to also play the role of catalytic function in terms of catalyzing changes in the systems, because only then will the change be sustained and also across the entire system. And here, that's why Tanoto Foundation places a lot of focus in terms of working with other like-minded organizations, including the government and NGOs, and in the case of education, together with the schools and the educators and parents, to make sure that what we do is actually scale across, not just in terms of programmatic scaling, but also in terms of systematic scaling. We are putting a lot more emphasis on advocacy work. We're putting a lot more emphasis on building the field building, making sure that the entire ecosystem is progressing and not just in terms of individual programs. Of course, there are challenges. Different actors in the ecosystem may be having different state of readiness, may have slightly different approaches, may have slightly focus. But I think it's important all the more that we have platforms like Philanthropy Asia Alliance, and yesterday we just launched our education community, so that we can bring together such like-minded organizations to work together, not just crowd in the resources, but more importantly, bring in knowledge, bring in networks, bring in know-hows, so that all of us can move together in this journey to shape the future of the education.
Thank you for that, and it makes me think of the 3 T's of philanthropy, which is time, talent, and treasure. It's not just treasure, the money and the funding, it's your time and talent and the skills you share. With that, let's go to Nicole, Prudence Foundation. Tell us more about how you've been committed over the years to invest in education and some of the challenges that you faced and why you have always pushed for a multi-country long-term approach.
Multi-country, I'll start with that first. I think multi-country is because we are a corporate foundation and we have businesses across 13 markets in Asia and 8 markets in Africa. So there is a geographical footprint whereby a lot of these markets, share similarities in terms of the challenges they face, development gaps, the needs as well. So we see that there is opportunity to really kind of scale our program to geographies that shares, common needs. And so if I were to sort of talk about our journey, I think, when Prudence Foundation started as about 10 years ago in 2012, so 12 years ago. When we started off small, and a lot of the work that we do is sort of like more like a donation, a grant. And then as we kind of move a little bit deeper and understand the social issues and also the program that we work towards, we then contributes towards like really designing and looking at solutions on the ground. How do we really touch upon like number of children, number of students, really looking at the grassroots program and downstreaming those programs. And over the years, we started to transform into more like beyond downstreaming program. Is there a role that we could play to also contribute towards a systemic change? Ultimately, you talk about the 3 T's, and our challenges, and also the things that sort of motivate us is 3 S. Firstly, the first S is really how do we scale, because it's the level of impact that we're looking at, we don't want to confine it to, one school, one child, but how do we ensure that, the changes, the program will be able to reach as many children as possible to at least make an impact to the society. And the second S is that how do we make it sustainable? I was at the session yesterday, and, Mr. Tony Blair was, the speaker, and he talks about the best philanthropic is that when the philanthropic money stops and the program continue to run. And we want to look at our programs from a sustainability perspective, such that it no longer relies on our funding, but it can self-run in the future, and that requires transformative systemic thinking. And the third part, which I actually find is quite challenging, is speed. Coming from a private sector, we run things very fast. You say pom 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 next year, and things move. And I found that in the space that we work, if we want to run fast, we could run alone. But if we want to make sure that it's a long-term impact, we really need to bring a lot of people on board. And sometimes, that will take time. Working with Ministry of Education, with community, with NGOs, with, the whole ecosystem perspective really takes time. But if it's there for the long term. So I think we are still facing challenges, but I think it is an exciting journey.
Thank you for that, and that's a good segue to Raman. I wanted to hear from you, for the audience, on your approach to the sharing of learnings across funders and foundations. How do you go about that?
Sharing of learning. So we do lots of white papers. For those who are familiar with Octava Foundation's work, and I know I'm amongst friends here, and most of you are. We at the foundation are actually guilty of being a compulsive serial collaborator. And that's also from a space of we are a relatively young and relatively small foundation. So just in comparison, on the other end of this panel, we, with 40 million a year of investment, we do 2 million a year. So you're bound to think about, well, what does this resource mean in the context of the complexities that we're up against? So we intentionally at the foundation invest heavily in our own learning, in our team's learning of what would it take for us to really unpack where do we deploy these dollars. Because of course, while they're small, we still want them to be meaningful, and we still want them to be impact creating. I beg your pardon, something fell, but I'll find it later. So for us, when we start learning, we start sharing what we are learning. So we recently did an EdTech challenge, and before we started on looking at how do we invest in EdTech in the region, we were like, do we know enough about the opportunity of EdTech in the region? Is the region ready for EdTech? What is the soft and the hard infrastructure around education systems? Beyond education system, what is the connectivity infrastructure around the countries for on which EdTech could be then layered? So we started kind of learning it for ourselves, and then we realized actually we're not researchers, we're not fit for the job. So we brought in a boutique agency to help us with that research, and then that white paper actually became a primer, not just for us to design the EdTech challenge, but it became a primer for all applicants who were then applying, because then they were relieved of the pressure of proving the case of why their EdTech is required. because we'd already identified the needs of it and the uses of it and the opportunities that the region presents for itself. Similarly, we recently started kind of becoming more pertinent with our focus around the work that we do in Singapore. And as K-12 is a wide, diverse age group, and there are very different learning outcomes at different stages of life, and we've chosen to work within the primary school age group. And while we're thinking of the primary age group, it was really important for us to say, who does the attainment gap exist for? Who's at the receiving end of this inequity? What can we change about it? What does it mean to be shifting these? And what do we know of the global evidence of what works when we are enabling adaptive personalized learning? What is the global evidence of how do you equip parents with the right knowledge, which is changing their behaviors and attitudes towards learner as well as the learning? So when you think of all of these things, you come upon, oh my God, but we can't do this. We are funders, probably investment managers, prior grant makers, prior bankers. How do we put ourselves in the shoes of what it means to be working in this nuance of education? So you end up kind of investing in research and finding the right evaluation partners to help you kind of boil the ocean on the global evidence so that you can distill what would make the difference here. So your 2 million can actually really be put where the mouth is. And then we make these research available, so they're all on our website. While we were doing this work, we also then engage with the stakeholders, so these research is not done in isolation of a consultant and a research consultant kind of boiling the ocean on their own PCs, but we engage the ecosystem to shape those learnings, to really distill what really needs to happen now and what's the sense of urgency where we should be putting our dollars. So yes, so I invite all of you, if you're interested in attainment gap in the region and EdTech and the attainment gap in Singapore and what can be done about it, there are 2 very long white papers available on our website that I invite you to read.
Thank you for that, and it brings also the topic of practitioner scholarly approaches where you link evidence to the practice in real time with evaluative approaches in real time, not to wait for something to be ended before we know if it worked or not. And from this attainment gap, we move to the climate education gap, and you speak of green guardians. Could you say more about that and where we stand on that?
So as I said, the Green Guardians program is a holistic school assistance program that helps the primary school students attain their green school accreditation. But maybe a little bit why I shifted towards this. It's actually quite personal to me. I've 3 children, and I've always given them the best opportunities for growth and learning. And I actually witnessed firsthand how the right climate education and instilling eco-friendly habits from an early age can shape the mindset of the kids. It's not just about learning to recycle or learning to conserve energy, but it's also about empowering them to become active agents for positive change in this field. So that's why I'm very excited about this. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And we're going to move now to a second round of questions. We have some 15 minutes, and then we'll open up for Q&A, just so you know where we stand in the program. I'm going to come back to the Tanoto Foundation, and we would like to hear from you on the multi-sectoral approach that UNICEF has, that you have, where you connect fighting stunting to education outcomes. Could you say more about that?
Sure. I think for the benefit of those who are not familiar with the issue of stunting, maybe just a quick primer on it. Stunting is a condition where a child, because of poor nutrition, actually does not grow in line with the developmental milestones. Now, this is a huge problem in some parts of the world. In Indonesia, where we operate, when we first started, 1 in 3 children is actually stunted. Now, in absolute terms, this is an astonishing 10 million children under the age of 5 who are stunted. Now, if you think about it, stunting is not just, physical, a compromise of the physical growth, but it's also shortchanging the child because brain development, immunity, the immune system and so on, all get compromised as a result. And it's irreversible, meaning, you can't go later on in life and try to reverse it. So every time you take a snapshot on Indonesia, 10 million children are actually in this kind of condition. Now, and you think about it also, it is something that can be avoided because it's just about simple behavioral changes. And that's where, UNICEF and Tanoto Foundation has been working very hard over the past 5 years. Just simple things like social behavior change communication. Nationally, there's a national strategy against stunting by the government of Indonesia. What we do is we help translate that to local policies and local programs for the villages. We also help identify at-risk families and connect them to available services. Through our hard work and also through our hard work with other organizations like World Bank, Gates Foundation, USAID, we have managed to bring down the stunting rate in just 5 years from 1 in 3, as I mentioned, to 1 in 5 today. Now, that is still a high ratio, but if you think about it, we have literally changed the lives of about 4 to 5 million children under the age of 5 and their families. Just simply giving them proper nutrition, proper awareness of what to do in terms of parenting, and proper hygiene conditions so that they can grow up and be able to access the education. Because you can't talk about education if the child is not even ready for education. So that's where we are very heartened with all the collaborations with UNICEF, USAID, World Bank, Gates Foundation, and many, many others, including the government of Indonesia, to really address a very simple yet tricky issue within the Indonesian environment. And we have seen quite a bit of success in just 5 years.
Great to hear that and to hear some of the good stories, not just the doom and gloom. Let's go back to Raman. Octava Foundation is committed to contributing to the education ecosystem through multiple initiatives. And we'd like to hear a little bit more about that and some of the real challenges. Just speak of the challenges for the audience.
Challenges with collaborations.
With collaboration, with launching initiatives, and where you find stumbling blocks, obstacles, because we tend not to speak about them. And we know that as soon as we overcome them, that's when we can move to scale. But generally, we either drop the pilot or not stick with it. So what are the things from your own personal experience dealing with this?
Maybe I take it in 2 parts. Let's speak about the program level challenges and then about the collaborations and probably the need of for the collaboration. So from the program level, there seems to be a lot of isolated programming around how do we support learners. A lot of it is distributed between we are the state and we do it this way, and we are the non-state actors and we do it this way. And of course, the challenge stays, how do we get non-state actors to work with the state? However challenging and complex that is, that's the only way to do it. So I think while it comes with its challenges, we cannot not work with the state, because otherwise we are building tangents. And we're not actually building comprehensive conveyors for our children to really keep transitioning through the education system. So I would request us to think about, are we building tangents or do we have a dotted line to the state? While that work is challenging, I think it's an important long-term commitment to let's just keep finding ways of how do we get as close to the state as possible. If not close to the state today, let's be aligned to what the state's agendas are, and let's continue the discourse and deliberation with the state. So I think that's the first port of call. The second port of call is actually when we think about learning outcomes and we're thinking about who's playing at creating learning outcomes. So again, there is state, and maybe I contextualize it to more around the learning outcomes for the most marginalized population. For the lack of better word, let's call it bottom of the pyramid learner. And at the bottom of the pyramid learner, we have a constant challenge of the state does A, it's not good enough. Let's do B, but the state's not interested in B because the state wants to do A, but B is better. But because we don't know how it's linking to A, we'll always be doing the B on the side as a tangent. And then the question around sustainability comes. And then in all of this, we have non-for-profit organizations doing this B, and then we have a C, which the private sector does, which is more market forces. So EdTech predominantly currently is market-led. And while EdTech is predominantly market-led, they are very motivated, and we learned it through the MIT Solve Challenge that we did. We had 10 organizations that got selected, and we're a grant maker, by the way. We are a philanthropic organization. We ended up investing in 7 of those 10 being for-profit organizations and making them unrestricted grants, knowing very well that these are for-profit organizations would always be doing education products for profit because those organizations were very motivated. Those founders were very motivated by making their products affordable, available, and accessible to the bottom of the pyramid. So I think the other challenge stays, what is philanthropy willing to buy? Is philanthropy willing to buy the most charitable solution, or are we willing to buy the most effective one? And then I think we should open our mind to where the effective programming is. So I'll just pause there from what I see the challenges and the opportunities within the space.
Thank you, Raman. And maybe Nicole, on the Prudence Foundation, you've worked on early childhood development, financial education, education resilience against disasters. Any challenges there you would like to share with us?
I think the challenges is like, I think perhaps like kind of like refer back to the earlier comments that I have made. I think the challenges is it's surmountable because we want to, because for Prudence Foundation, I think we have moved beyond grant making, and what we wanted to kind of look at ourselves is really looking at transformative philanthropy. So, you know, putting on the system thinking, putting on the sustainability, scalability and speed, we look at programs and how do we achieve these 3 S, and how do we bring all the partners onto the same sort of like, you know, same boat and work together, you know, the PPP and all that. And I think along the way, there are times whereby we feel that the challenges is not so much of the program itself, but because of the you know, the environmental factors, the factors that are outside of our control. And sometimes, you know, it takes a long time to overcome those, you know, those challenges. And therefore, as much as we want to move things as fast as possible, you know, it doesn't really kind of translate into immediate results. And therefore, at times, we need to look at programs on the scale of 3 to 5 years. And along the way, we have to justify a commitment to continue to invest before you can see the ultimate results. And so I think it is really kind of balancing those, you know, different objectives, stakeholders, and program outcomes to ensure that we ultimately reach there.
That's a great point on moving from transactional relations and short-term funding to more transformational long-term with the intentionality as you were all speaking. Fifi, we'll end the questions with you, and then before we finalize, 14,000 students have gained climate literacy skills. Teachers have gained those skills. You've seen in your programs electricity bills go down. What is your ambition for the future?
We envision to expand our reach to empower more students and equip them with knowledge and skills to address climate change. We also want to create a network of eco-friendly schools that can act as a model of sustainability and resilience within their communities. And I think our ultimately our goal is to cultivate a generation of empowered individuals that are equipped to lead progressive change to address climate change. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And as we come to a close, there's a question to the 4 panelists on what would you do as a philanthropist, or what would you want if you were a philanthropist to do,
Or what would you advise others to do? Think about it. What are the final thoughts or insights you would like to share with this group for our own learning? I know, Raman, that you had the MIT Innovation Solve Challenge. You have all different things you can bring to the table. But what is this deep-seated issue, matter, or learning, those snippets of gold that you want to share with the audience? So let's start with you, Benny.
I think we as a group need to learn better so that we can enable better learning in the classroom. What do I mean by that? I think there's a good of very valuable learnings on the ground when we implement programs, when we execute projects on, in the schools and so on. I think we need to learn from those, do better impact measurement, better understanding of what works and what does not, and therefore help us in scaling it across the entire system. The second thing I want to leave behind is also the need to collaborate more. I think this has been a general theme throughout the 2 days of summit and also in this panel. Not just to scale the programs, but to actually bring in different actors with maybe different risk appetites to help see through a program's entire life cycle. So that the programs can graduate, in a sense, you know, together with the students, graduate to be in the future. Yeah, so those are my 2 thoughts.
Thank you, Benny. Let's go to Fifi. Your thoughts?
Well, I like to see schools prioritize environmental sustainability and climate education and integrate them into the school curriculum. And also, I echo what Benny said, partnerships are crucial to develop scalable solutions so that we can make broader impact in education systems globally. Thank you.
Nicole?
I think I want to echo again on the power of partnerships, the PPPPP, many P's that come into the picture. And I think because the scale and the complexity of the issues that we're trying to solve, it's not one person role that can solve. So I think every kind of organization, every partner has a role and also brings value to the table. So I really wanted to echo the importance of partnerships.
Thank you, and Raman?
Clara, I think I have a handful, but I'll keep it to a couple. First and foremost, a shameless plug. We have everybody who's in the room and is a funder and a philanthropist, runs a foundation, is a grant maker, wants to be one, and works in education should be part of the group APC is running with the International Education Group, where funders are coming together to learn together, to learn about all that we know about how are we going to make sure that these 30 million children are in schools. What do we already know about what has worked, so that we don't go about innovating where things have already been learned? How do we make sure the 25% of the children in Thailand who are not learning but at school do get to foundational literacy and numeracy? What do we know already about teaching at the right level, structured pedagogies? What do we already know about play as a precursor to developing socio-emotional competencies? Come together, learn together. If you haven't yet been part of that group, please reach out to Sue and anybody of APC here. Let us know how can we be of use to your learning journey. The second, I think if we are putting, and I wanted to go back to the word that, Clara, that you used in the construct, which was, when you were framing this conversation, intentionality. Irrespective of what we are investing in, let's just be intentional about prioritizing learner outcomes. And I say that, let's become more intentional about prioritizing learner outcomes. No amount of technology, no amount of newness, no amount of innovation will be useful if we don't have the eye on the prize, which is that of equitable learner outcomes. So I beg of you all, I invite you all to be intentional about our investments and focus on learner outcomes. Thank you.
This is a great way, Raman, to end this very inspiring panel. Maybe a few words of conclusion before we open up. Let's remember that we have
the common grammar between the multilaterals, the NGOs, the private sector, the philanthropists, the foundations, the businesses, the corporates. It's the SDGs. That's the only common grammar we have right now. It's maybe imperfect, but it's the one we have. And let's remember that SDG 17 is about partnerships. And partnerships are painful. And often it's those painful partnerships that scale, that then engage in speedier approaches, but they're processes at the beginning that are painful, and we need to really stay the course. And also maybe from a UNICEF perspective, as we conclude this, with everything you've heard and seen, to rely on the evidence, to rely on the experience of boots on the ground, but also to really think of a child-sensitive lens in everything we do, from the supply chains and corporates to and be intentional about it. So there's a lot of work that can be done beyond just the funding, and it's the advocacy part that you can do in your different realms of work and in your different organizations or companies or corporations, foundations. And I think each one of us can be a philanthropist with what we have. Some have wealth, some have time, some have expertise, some have all of them together. And I think every single person can give back, including our wonderful guest from Vietnam who was here, who is already giving back to her community and society. So with that, I'm very happy to close this panel. Let's have a big round of applause to all of you. Thank you, very inspiring. In the afternoon, no one fell asleep. I was watching the audience. And now we take 10 minutes, maximum 5 minutes for 5 minutes? 5 minutes for Q&A, and I hope you will not shy away from asking a couple of questions. We have one in the back. Oh my God, we have 3 primed to ask a question. Let's start with the very back, sir. Over to you.
Hi, my name is Lam Yuen Phong. I'm known to many of the panelists here. I represent our own family foundation. All the programs here are absolutely necessary and they're admirable, they're very laudable, but they are helping marginalized children mainly. And the reality is most of our children or grandchildren most likely will do much better than any of the children we're helping. If we take the 2 biggest evils in the world, inequality and climate, the situation in 5 years' time is going to be worse than it is today. And our children and grandchildren will be less affected than the others. UNICEF has the 4 pillars of education: learning knowledge and learning skills, and all these programs are focusing on these 2 pillars. There are the 2 other pillars: learning how to be and learning to live in society. And it's because we've been neglecting these 2 pillars that we have all kinds of problems in the world today, mental health and increasing inequality and worsening climate issues. There are ways to address that, and it's all with the heart. So the question is, what can we philanthropists do in terms of these 2 pillars, teaching children how to be and how to live in society? And it's not only about meditation and mindfulness. It may not even have to be that, but to see that there are other forms of wealth besides money. You touched upon that, time, compassion, networks, and all that, but how to make the children and the parents and the teachers live that in their day-to-day life, so that slowly but surely we move towards a world where money goes back to where it was hundreds of years ago, a medium of exchange and no longer a goal and an objective to try to achieve at the expense of other human beings and nature. Thank you.
Thank you for these wise words. I'm sure there'll be quick reactions. Before we go to the next question, just wanted to remind ourselves the root of the word philanthropy, which is the Greek root, which is love for humanity. So it is about the heart, as you say, and I think we sometimes forget because it's a technical word, but it's actually a very simple term of love for humanity and love for giving. Let's go to the question there, please. Go ahead. Mike. Yes, you had your hand up earlier. Yes, a mic is coming towards you.
Hi, good afternoon. Tony Lambina from the Ayala Foundation in the Philippines. I'm very curious about the role of the teacher in all of your interventions. One thing that the Ayala Foundation has learned over 25 years of supporting public schools is the way in which we could scale our interventions is to focus on the quality of instruction and teacher quality and teacher well-being. And so I was hoping to ask for your comments on that and maybe exchange notes later. But what are some of the key indicators or key interventions that enhance the quality of instruction? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Quick, anyone wants to come in on any of the two interventions, and then we'll take one more. Go ahead.
Maybe I take the questions together first. Just quick comments. I started my career as an educator, by the way. So I have a personal interest in what the second gentleman just said. I am a believer that in the case of educational philanthropy, the change has to happen from within. And in this case, especially with the teachers, because unlike other philanthropic areas, our influence of the philanthropic dollar can only go as far as influencing what happens in the classroom through the teachers. The teachers are the transmission medium of our philanthropic capital. So you're absolutely right, we need to look at this piece. In the case of, for example, where we're familiar with in Indonesia, many of the teachers are not certified and they are not former teachers. Even today, there's a shortfall of 1.3 million teachers in Indonesia alone. So this is a huge problem in some countries. And we have to settle some of these basic pieces, and then can we go on to what the first question about also putting in things like mental health, living together with society and so on. So I fully echo what the two questions are about, and I think this is an important piece that we need to work on.
Would you like to take that?
Yeah, maybe I respond to both. So Tony, to your question around the teachers and teacher capacity, I think we've seen through our programs a couple of ways where it's most effective. One is use of technology to now really, because one of the challenge with adaptive personalized learning is we have one teacher to 40, 60 children in a classroom. So, pardon me. So then technology now gives us the opportunity of using technology creatively. How do we then enable this personalized adaptive instruction and learning? And also on the teacher capacity, I think there's a role of not just technology, but in general, putting more intentionality between or behind the professional development approaches that we have for teachers. So we're partnering with Firetree. They work in Thailand, and they have an organization within Thailand that operates as an implementing partner, Starfish, and we're partnering with them on working with the school leaders, equipping them to prioritize learner outcomes for their schools, and by the way, professional development for their teachers. And that's one way to increase the learning outcomes within schools, is by better professional development opportunities available for teachers. But I also wanted to take the opportunity to respond to Lam's question around what is the purpose of education? And today we didn't indulge in it. And I think we need a full panel on it. I encourage next time when PAS is doing this that we have a conversation about the purpose of education. And to take a leaf from Mr. Tony Blair's panel insights that he was discussing, we again have a very classic problem. We have education systems that have been cemented to serve a very specific need of the Industrial Revolution and hasn't evolved since the colonial times. So I think we should reflect on that. And if we are really thinking about transitioning that system to the new system that's relevant for the future that nobody knows, good luck. So I think we do need to start shifting from within the system. I don't think there is a new system that's going to come on the horizon and make this system obsolete. We have far too much economic GDPs invested in our systems, but we do need to recognize that they're not working, and slowly and steadily we need to start asking ourselves, what is the purpose of why do we have learners in these four walls? What are we doing with these learners when they do come to school?
Thank you, great points. Any final, yes, please, go ahead.
Robin. So Robin Milden, CEO of the Centre for Evidence and Implementation. I just wrote down some of the words that all of the panel were using often, and then I wanted to ask you a question. So we're talking about catalytic knowledge, scaling, boiling the ocean of global evidence, which I promptly tweeted.
That you set me up?
Yeah. What's the most effective approach goes to your comment around teachers. So that was because it's not just about children, there's an implementation mechanism to supporting children, and some of you have more experience than that. Yesterday we heard a lot about evidence base. We're talking a lot about impact, but I haven't heard so much about partnering around evidence as a global good and ensuring that that is shared, contextualized for the region that you're working in. We're not repeating over and over again, studying the same thing, conducting the same evaluations, that we're sort of brave enough to partner together to create that, but also create that for the region. As Raman knows, there's a lot of this done up in Western countries, but we've got a lot of evidence infrastructure to build here, which could aim to accelerate and help us decrease this gap, because we're still sitting around 15 years between things we know can help kids right now and that being implemented in business as usual, whether it be in here or in the region. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about two parts to my question, because evidence alone also will do us no good. It's implementing and improving that evidence, and where do you balance the investment and your ability to partner and invest in that to almost make evidence and the latest evidence quickly available to enable decision making, not to be told what to do, but to enable decision making, but also thinking about your comments on partnering around implementing and improving that evidence. So not stopping at the studies, but continuing to go build on and test them in real life, and how you will all partner to create the funding opportunity to do that, and that we will all applaud that, and our job is done.
That's a great question, opening up to the panelists, just to say, generally evidence generation is underfunded, data is underfunded, prevention is underfunded. If you look at the experience of UNICEF in that, it's a niche part, and it generates very little interest from funders, just to put that on the table. So to your point, let's open up. I don't know, Nicole or Fifi. Go ahead, Fifi.
Yes, we forgot to mention about evidence. So every end or in the middle of the program, we will use, we'll partner with the University of Indonesia or with other like CEI to do independent evaluations. And from the results, we will go forward to improve our program. In fact, we just did together with Tanoto and the others in APC a landscape study on ECD. And from there, we actually learned and compare the differences between Indonesia, Thailand, China, and Singapore. It's very useful, those results, and we have been making progress on them in terms of data collection. Yeah, thank you.
Nicole, anything on this point?
I think from our perspective, I think we look at evidence in sort of two aspects. One is that, we kind of learn it along the way throughout the years, is that when we run programs, when we work with partners, NGO, to kind of look at the program, the impact evaluation is by default built in from the onset. such that we know exactly what sort of evidence that we're looking for and what is the purpose of that evidence. Is it to inform, or is it to advocate, or for policy making, or is it to satisfy funders, or what is the purpose of that evidence, and exactly what are we looking for? I think so. We kind of like now learn that every program that we run, it builds in from the onset exactly what sort of evaluation and evidence we're looking for. And then the second part that we look at data evidence is from the perspective of what is the gap. As an example, I mean, there are new studies, new gaps that is surfacing, that we don't know what we don't know, and therefore we need to find out what we don't know. And what is then the purpose of those research, those data? And from our perspective, whenever we fund a research, a purpose for research piece or white paper, it is always to use that information to inform solution or to inform action. So I think, from that perspective, I totally agree. There are a lot of literature out there. It's important not to create another similar research, but look at what is already out there, and therefore what is the gap, what is the information gap, and how does it all come together to inform actions or solutions.
Thank you. Final
Clara,
words
I know
to you.
we've run out of time, but I do want to respond to Robin because she's raised a really important point, especially in the context of education. Education is the longest standing industry mankind knows. Everything we need to know about how children learn has been learned. Can I say that again? Everything we need to know about how children learn have been learned. The key issue currently is that we are not able to translate that good evidence and knowledge into practical implementation design. And we see that repetitively designed program after design program. And EdTech is a great example. We're really excited about EdTech. I see that as an opportunity. I don't think it's the silver bullet, but it definitely has opportunities. Again, one of the challenges with EdTech is that it is tech first, and it completely is reinventing the wheel around how children learn, the instructional methodologies. So I do encourage us not to reinvent the wheels, and I think if you are funding programs, if you are designing programs, do think about how do we draw down on the existing evidence base, how do we isolate the practical elements of the design that has already shown to work in the context that it has worked, and then apply them into our design thinking.
Thank you for these concluding remarks. This is a lot to digest that will be taken into the different groups. So I think you've prepared, you've paved the way for our participants. With that, a big round of applause to the audience and to all of you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are supposed to just introduce, and we're going to spend like 3 minutes each, or 3 to 5 minutes each to talk about two things. Now, one is taking a future-oriented approach, and Ben here, my good friend, only 40 years we've known each other, will take a systems thinking approach, and then we want to apply that to the table discussion. Okay, why futures? I mean, APC, Asia Philanthropy Circle, Sue introduced just now as a platform for philanthropists around the region to come together. Actually, when you saw the panel just now, 3 of the 4 panelists were our members. So we are everywhere in this summit. And there are many other members who are among you as well. And the one thing that we have been doing is looking at the future, right? We published 2 publications as a compendium. One is the scenarios for the future of Asian philanthropy, and we were looking at 2050, and together with it, the strategies, to address the scenarios that which are not forecasts, but it helps us think a bit more discontinuously, to think about a world, a future that might be quite different from our world today, so that we can really look ahead, look long-term. Philanthropy, as we know, has, unlike government terms, can look very much much further ahead than public officials can. We can introduce, and with the future sort of thinking, we can introduce more disruptions into the linear way that we typically work. So I urge you, to be non-conventional about as we have the table discussion, and to experiment, because philanthropy's role in society, one of the greatest roles, because philanthropic dollars is so small compared to government dollars and the private sector dollars, is to experiment, to innovate, and to sometimes provoke. In our strategy guide, I think if you go to the next slide, we talk about being 4 different roles for philanthropy: being an advocate, being a convener, being an educator, being an innovator. And during the facilitators will use this framework to spur discussion, right? Advocate, I think we always need to advocate not just to the public, but to government. What is working, what is not working, what the real issues are, sometimes openly, sometimes behind closed doors. As a convener, we need to encourage cross-sector sort of collaboration. As an educator, we need to do a lot more capacity building, because, particularly in education, we heard, there's a lot that we already know, but, we need to make what is known, what is evidence-based, known to people who are implementing programs. And as an innovator, as I mentioned, we need to innovate. And I'm glad that at APC, we use this to get our members to work together collaborative on projects. You heard about the ECD research project that's funded by a lot of our members. Here, in fact, 3 of them who are on the panel were funders of the ECD comparison research study of Singapore, China, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And out of that, we actually had 2 bills tabled by 2 senators on ECD in the Philippines, out of 1 discussion on the findings. And so that's remarkable. I'm going to just pass it very quickly, to Benedict to talk a bit about what systems thinking is and why we should care about it and how it applies to education.
I'm glad he looked at me because I was daydreaming. So, you are at this summit, and it's the Philanthropy Asia Alliance. And the idea of this alliance is to get capital together to achieve impact. And to go beyond that and achieve collective impact. So the Philanthropy Asia Alliance team, together with the new team I'm setting up in the Temasek Trust, called Systems, Knowledge, and Innovation, I'll share a bit about that. We're saying, look, if you want to achieve collective impact, you need to start with some systems thinking framework. Okay? So what does this mean? I don't know, have you heard of this phrase, systems thinking? Many of you may have come across, many years ago, the Learning Organization and Peter Senge, right? And he talks about the 5 disciplines, and one of them is systems thinking. There's another approach to systems thinking, and this involves root cause mapping. Have you heard of that? Where you start with something and you say, this happens because this was so, and this was so because this was so, and this was so. And you draw up all your tracks, and you find those points that, if you enter there at those points, your interventions affect multiple areas. So systems thinking has this benefit. So let me just make it a bit more real, right, in terms of the education conversations that we were having this afternoon. And you can hear, you heard all the good speakers, and they were telling you about the projects and the impact intent, trying to achieve, impact through all the funding and the collaborations, partnerships came out. But perhaps if we can look at education and inclusive development as a whole, and maybe frame it maybe under 3 simple buckets. It came out quite strongly, right? if you don't start young, you're too late. Education. So the first framing, or the first bucket of things that we can think of in terms of education and inclusive development is this idea of maternal health, maternal and child health and well-being, prenatal, through the young years of the child. If you don't get it right, I was told that if you don't get it right at the prenatal stage, the granddaughter will suffer, not the next generation, but 2 generations down. So if you frame it like that, then you say maybe we need a set of interventions, a set of support for this area. Second one, our formal education, enlarging it to holistic and inclusive education, which includes not just learning ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, but also about framing the idea of ethics, values, and environment-orientedness or environment concerns, putting into the education system, growing individuals, young individuals into contributing members of society, and not forgetting that you continue your education all through. Someone was telling me this morning that, post-grade school or post-primary school, that's where there are a number of dropouts, especially in Asian communities where the boys are seen to be old enough and with good enough physique for the parents to say, oh, now you go and work in my factory or you go and work in my farm, right? Rather than continue your education. The girls, on the other hand, don't go to school in some communities. You know why? Because there are no toilets. Simple as that, no toilets. So when we look at the whole structure of holistic and inclusive education, considering the different pathways that there may need to be, not just for the formal education, through lifelong learning, through skills, but also where there are special needs, youth with special needs, and how we get them to, to living full lives with potential. So that's the second bucket. The third bucket, which I call enabling ecosystems. Now this one perhaps not given enough attention. Not just schools, not just IT systems, accessibility, but the idea of, hey, and Lawrence was telling me, are you educating people for jobs that are going to be available when they come out from school? So your whole economic development policy of a community, the whole international trade policy comes into play as well. And if you look at systems thinking as a whole, then your intervention should cover a whole range. But of course, no one philanthropy organization can cover everything. So what the Philanthropy Asia Alliance is trying to do is to say, okay, we frame it like this. Who wants to play where? Where are you already playing? How do you weave the story, your contribution, your support, and your interventions into this big story? This is a teaser, really, of things that are going to come with the Philanthropy Asia Alliance, because this is what I'm going to have to do in terms of work and build up this systems knowledge, and I'm going to knock on all doors to get knowledge and understanding and thinking from everyone to build it up nicely so that we can re-offer back as value to every member in the PAA. Thank you, Lawrence.
I have no idea why I agreed to doing this. It meant I had to pay attention from the start. But I'm deciding to say what I want to say anyway, which is, well, I think Benny said, is Benny still around? That he started education, his life as a teacher. I also started my life in education. My career in education, my first job was in the Ministry of Education in Singapore, recruiting teachers for our school system. So I only did that for a couple of years, but I mean, I really enjoyed that work. But I saw up front how difficult it is, even in a system like Singapore, to get the best teachers. And we were, in some cases, this is a closed door forum, right? It's not recorded. We were really scraping the bottom of the barrel, in that Singapore. Imagine other places. And yet, if you look at this education, how much of the world's GDP goes to education? 4.3%, I looked it up, in 2020, about $5 trillion. That's a lot of money. but it's really unequally distributed, right? On one end, we have about 250 million children in the world who are out of school. 90 million in Central and South Asia, 32 million in East and Southeast Asia. That's 122 million, half of that in Asia. And on the other end of the scale, we see the most selective universities, the ones that I think many of our children want to go to, have got admission rates of 3+%, 4%. I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? If you want to go to Ivy League universities, it's just impossible. So what is happening? Both ends are, crazy things are happening on both ends. There's a huge inequity in education, and we have to fix it, because it mirrors the inequity in society, which is unsustainable. And I'm going to advocate 3 A's of things that we need to do, because we're talking about education, so must have A's, right? And I'm going to advocate 3 F's that we shouldn't do, because we are avoiding F's. The 3 A's is, number 1, being agnostic. Agnostic about where we play, because it changes all the time. We have to go to where we can make the biggest difference. And we have to not be married to specific programs, because things change. The education minister changes, right, all the time in many of our countries. And it's like, what you can do yesterday is different from what you can do tomorrow. You need to be open to different types of interventions, learning from different areas, learning from the best, learning from adjacent areas, plumbing global evidence. That's what we heard. That's why we set up APC. Our members are doing extraordinary things. I mean, you heard some of them. Ayala Foundation, I went to the Centex program, I went to Tondo. Incredible, the work that you've done. Needs to be scaled, of course, we know that. Heinrich Foundation, they do something on trade, they do a lot on trade education, right? And I think they just published a report by Oxford Economics. Because these are, I think, people that we can learn from, even if we are in adjacent areas. Being an advocate, you need to put the spotlight on issues, and you need to get the government involved. We heard how important that is, because otherwise we cannot scale. Being adventurous, being an innovator, learning from evidence, global evidence, because we heard that everything we need to know about education we have learned already, but it's how we execute it that is different. For one context, what works, how do you prioritize? The Lian Foundation, we set up CHILD. I'm going to do a call out to Robin, because she helped us set it up. The Center for Holistic Initiatives for Learning and Development at NUS is our foundation's largest gift went to setting up the center she started. And it's all about implementation. So learning from the best and learning from and informing us how to implement. So use their research, which is incredible. The 3 F's now, what do we need to avoid? Number 1, fads. We always look for nice, shiny things, even though we know what works. One big example is one laptop for a child. We know how badly that failed, right? So avoid fads, avoid fear. We fear failure, we fear engaging with others, we just stay in our lane, we fear crossing sector, we fear engaging government, we fear being holistic, we need to adopt systems thinking. And the last, don't avoid being friendless. Okay, don't avoid being isolated, avoid, the positive is to partner, because again, there's a lot of evidence that we need to join up, but also education is such a big, complex issue that we need to bring people together to work. And this is part of what we're doing to begin the conversation, to get partnership. Of course, partnership is APC's DNA. That's what we're about. But I think more than ever, because of the inequity, we have to do this. So with that, hope that some seeds of collaboration have been planted, and we hope that when we come back next year, that there are some partnerships that have already taken root and started growing. So thank you very much for staying till the end.